So unbelievably unintelligent. I drink your milkshake. I drink it up.
What is up, everybody? It is Monday. It is the start. It's the NFL Week 1 is going to be taking place this week. So we got baseball, obviously, for the next few days. And then Thursday, we've got a Thursday night football. Friday, there's going to be Friday night football. Then, of course, Sunday, the main slate. So lots of football coming up. And if you guys are looking to play NFL DFS this year, which I assume is probably all of you in the chat, sign up for our core Sims package using the promo code KICKOFF. Jordan, put the graphic on the screen. Slurp King, do your work. All right, so Jordan's the Slurp King now. But if you guys look, we have got this deal going on. If you want to try out our Sims, or if you're just signing up to open the year, sign up using the promo code KICKOFF, get our core package for $1. So you get our single lineup sim for football, you get our Sims tool for football, build up to 1,000 lineups for the core package for just $1. It is affordable to everybody, even the Slurp King, Jordan Klein. So guys, go check that out. If you're going to be playing football this weekend, this is the deal to take advantage of. But now, baseball. And if you guys haven't done it yet, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Eric, what is happening?
I'm doing great. Ready to rock for this slate. We've got, 37 minutes, so I won't kill too much time. But Jordan Klein ordered a Slurpee to his place, and I don't really know what to think about it because that's like the least manly thing that I've ever heard of in my life.
Which is why, going forward, Jordan will be known as the Slurp King. That is going to be his nickname around here because of his love for Slurpees. It's not the most ridiculous order I've ever seen from a producer while we're doing a show. That goes back to Tyler way back in the day. It was probably like a year and a half ago where he was hungry and he DoorDashed toast to his house. So Jordan comes in second. That's
what I'm hungry for, Greg. Greg, I'm hungry for the toast.
It's pretty good, Tyler. As far as Jordan goes, he says he needed a Slurpee because it's like 100 degrees, which means he's just going to get a melted Slurpee by the time it's delivered to his house. So Slurp King Jordan Klein, enjoy sucking on that while we are breaking down tonight's baseball slate, which it's the second slate today. It was for the Labor Day holiday. Baseball throughout the day spread out across 2 slates. So we've got another smaller one for today, but actually these are kind of the size of slates that I really do happen to like for baseball. They're the ones that I have found that I'm most profitable in, whereas the ones like the 10, 11, 12 game slates, I don't necessarily hate them, but the way I play DFS, where I look for leverage, kind of hard to take advantage of some of those opportunities. But let's start looking at some of these pitchers here, Eric. We've got 2 pay-up options on DraftKings, Logan Gilbert as well as Garrett Cole. They are $9K in the case of Garrett Cole, $9,600 in the case of Logan Gilbert. Both of them fairly popular. Logan Gilbert, the most popular pitcher on the slate, pulling 40% ownership. Cole, the lesser owned of the two, at 22% ownership. Are you paying up for pitching much today, Eric? And if you are, which of these high-priced and somewhat popular pitchers are you liking?
Yeah, I like Logan Gilbert. He seems pretty good on this slate. I mean, this is a fun slate. I'm only going to play one lineup purely because I got some stuff I got to do, and then it's going to be done pretty quick. 8 o'clock is the last game that we have here for today, but I like Logan Gilbert. He's the most popular pitcher on the slate. I think building even one lineup against Oakland, I'm going to utilize him. It's a great ballpark to be pitching in. Strikeout stuff has been intact there when he's been at home. This is basically like a home game for Seattle in terms of like how this ballpark plays. There's not a lot I can say other than like you go through the top. I feel less confident in Garrett Cole with what he's been doing against righties of late in Texas. Just a little bit more of a quality lineup, even though it hasn't necessarily bore out against right-handed pitching. But it's at least, a little bit better ballpark than Oakland. And Osvaldo Bido, I guess we'll get to some of the other guys there in the 8K range, 7K range. But I find Logan Gilbert to be like a good, steady SP1, just about anything that you're doing today.
Yeah, it's hard to get, like way overweight to the field on him just because he's pulling 40% ownership. But I'm right there. He's in about half my lineups. He's got a matchup against Oakland, which, we've talked about it over the course of the last few months. It's not as easy of a matchup as a lot of people would have thought, but there are strikeouts to be had there. And the pitching options leave you a little bit to be wanting on this slate, especially considering you just mentioned Osvaldo Bido is $8,600 on the slate. And because the options are such slim pickings, Bido is still projected for 10% ownership, even at $8,600. So I'm right in line with the field on Logan Gilbert. I do come in a little bit underweight on Garrett Cole. I've got exposure to him in the teens in my lineup. So if you're looking to pay up for one pitcher, I do think Logan Gilbert is pretty clearly the guy. 8K pitchers, We've got Osvaldo Bido. He's 10% on at $8,600. Jared Jones, he's 13% on at $8,400. And then Joe Musgrove pitching at home against the Detroit Tigers. He is your other popular chalk pitcher on the slate. Him and Logan Gilbert. I think you just lock them into cash games considering the ownership. 30% to Musgrove and then the 40% to Logan Gilbert that we mentioned before. Of these 8K pitchers, I just gravitate towards Joe Musgrove the most because I feel the best about him. Jared Jones is a great talent, but I'm not exactly sure how deep the Pirates are going to be letting him work into games down the stretch of the season. He missed a bunch of time. And then Osvaldo Bido, $8,600 is a ridiculous price tag, especially when he's pulling ownership. Musgrove's pretty clearly the guy for me in this price range.
Yeah, he's pretty clearly the guy, but I will say I have the same concerns that you do with Jones. He's got the best strikeout stuff of the three in this range, but Jared Jones, there's no way that Pittsburgh's going to want to like unleash him. Maybe he does like what Garrett Crochet did the other night where he had 6 up, 6 down, 6 strikeouts through the first 2 frames. Did he get outside of 60 pitches? No, he did not again, but the point remains, like, I think 85 pitches kind of going to be where you're going to land on Jones from now until the end of the season. There's no point that they would have to let him or Skeens really go beyond. They're like their 2 foundational pieces. As for Bido, though, let's at least take a look at what the Seattle lineup is, because I do think there's like something to be said, depending on how many lineups you're playing, to roster a little bit. I mean, Justin Turner being in there doesn't help the strikeout rates, but everything else kind of does. I mean, there's some strikeouts to be had. At the beginning of the year, we were just jamming right-handed pitchers against Seattle ad nauseum. And now it's Justin Turner at 17.8%, Rojas and Robles, both sub 22%. Everybody else, 25, 26% plus. I mean, it gets a little bit wonky with some of the Seattle lineup, or like depending on the way that it rolls out on a day in, day out basis. I think you can probably get to a little bit over the field and it's not terribly difficult at 8,600. Am I saying to prioritize it? No, but he's the most positively leveraged pitcher in the tools. And I think that there's, at least some justification when you talk about 9.7%, like finding yourself to a little bit more, considering I don't think price is really much of a concern on this slate with some of the offenses being as cheap as they are.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's just hard for me to back either Bido or Jared Jones. And as far as Bido goes also, I much prefer to stack against him. Seattle isn't all that expensive. I only have Bido in 2% of my top 150 lineup. So there's other places I like getting different. It is not going to be with him, though. So let's talk about some of the other pitchers here, Eric. And let's just group all the rest of the guys together, because once you get past the top 2 pitchers, you've got 25% ownership going to Jameson Taillon. Every other pitcher, though, fairly low owned. Nobody else is more than 20% owned. So we got Zach Littell at $7,600 against your Minnesota Twins. Brian Bayo against the Mets. Jack Leiter, he's going to be pitching against the Yankees. A lot of these options don't really seem all that appealing to me. But let's start with Jameson Taillon. What do you make of him as being the most popular pitcher on the low end and the 3rd most popular pitcher overall on the slate?
Has everything to do with the way that the par factors are going to be there in Wrigley. We've seen this price get raised up to nearly minus 150. I basically said that was going to happen last night, got in at minus 134. That felt good on the Cubs side, but Jameson Taillon, the wind's blowing in. It's coming in at like 6 to 8 miles per hour. It's only 70 degrees in Chicago. Beautiful day to go watch a baseball game, that's for sure. But 3.5 implied total on the other side. Nick Gonzalez is going to be leading off for them on a day in, day out basis going forward. What a time to be alive. There's just some strikeouts at the back half of this lineup. There's, okay hitters at the top half. Obviously one very professional hitter in Brian Reynolds, and a guy I know, Neil Cruz, who can smack the crap out of baseballs when he isn't getting K'd incessantly. But overall for me today, I think Jameson Taillon is just fine. I'm just a little bit surprised to see Simeon Woods Richardson there at 6,500 pulling less ownership. Tampa Bay has been a strikeout haven, and it will continue to be yet again today. It's a great ballpark to be pitching in. Tampa Bay travel, Minnesota travel, but like Simeon Woods Richardson at least has good enough stuff here over the course of this season. I think he's outperformed any metric you would have for him. And yeah, he can strike out some dudes from time to time where he can spike a strikeout rate against righties. He does have a 189 expected ISO against them, but again, this ballpark should help him keep things somewhat intact. I kind of like going to the bottom end. He's my SP2 in my one lineup I rolled out today.
Let's see. What do I have of Jameson, Tyone? I am a little bit underweight to the field on him.
It's
Nothing
fine.
too crazy. However, I like some of the other contrarian pitchers more than him. So you mentioned one of them, Simeon Woods Richardson matchup
Yep.
against the Rays. I don't think that there's a significant difference between somebody like Simeon Woods Richardson and Jameson Tyone. For instance, you look at our top pitchers, Tua. We've got Jameson Taillon, a 19% chance being one of the top 2 scoring pitchers on the slate. Severino and Simeon Woods Richardson are both at 16%, but each of them have about half of the ownership that Jameson Taillon has. So with that being the case, I'm a little bit underweight to the field on Taillon, and then I get overweight to the field on Simeon Woods Richardson. I get overweight to the field on Luis Severino, and then I've got both of these guys in north of 20% of my lineups. And I like that as a pivot off of Jameson Taillon. I also think that's a good way to make otherwise popular stacks a little bit different, because I think this is a really good spot for the New York Yankees. I think this is a good spot for the Seattle Mariners against Osvaldo Bido as well, considering their price point. But these are 2 of the 3 most popular offenses on the slate. And I think one of the best ways to differentiate is just, instead of playing Taillon to pay up for the Yankees, play like Severino or Simeon Woods Richardson instead.
I'm with you. Again, I like Woods Richardson the most. Tampa Bay just routinely has been the strikeout haven that we've gone to over and over again here of late. I just remember the Houston series. We just saw insane K props, but it's maintained everywhere Tampa Bay's gone for the last month since the trade deadline, and I think it continues here. Simeon Woods Richardson, the priority. If I were playing 150, I would be way overweight to 15% of him. I would be a little bit overweight, I think, to Severino, even though that's terrifying. And Taillon, looking at the 150 that I built out, I was right around the field on him. So I don't have any kind of like issues with 25% by any means. Yeah, that kind of does it for every other pitcher here. There is a 4K pitcher in Ty Madden that everybody's going to want to stack against, myself included, but it is a 4K pitcher who is going to probably get a majority of this work coming off of yesterday, where the Detroit Tigers are damn dirty liars, and Max Kepler scratched. All right, good to know.
Yeah, so Max Kepler scratched. Who is going to be in there in his place? And how many lineups do I have with Kepler?
I am assuming that we're going to get... who are they going to roll out there? Arnold Wallner. I mean, we got everybody else freaking hurt. Manuel Margot's hurt. He's still out there. It's going to be Austin Martin for sure. Austin Martin's going to play center. He'll bat 9th.
Yeah, I'm just updating. All right, there we go. I'm just going to nuke the ROI that I have. Just do a massive negative ROI boost on Max Kepler, and then I'll fix the rest of it afterwards. But just making sure that I get him out of my lineups for now. You mentioned Ty Madden there. I don't like him, but I have some exposure to him in large field GPPs. He got a 6-game slate. He's, like you mentioned, the flat min at 4K. It doesn't take all that much. I mean, it could just simply be luck and variance, and all of a sudden a 4K pitcher scores 10 fantasy points. And sometimes on a small slate, a high scoring stack goes off. And we've seen pitching pricing really come down this year. But in turn, Eric, I don't know if you've noticed this, hitter pricing is absurd now. You regularly get hitters outside of Coors Field at 7K. I can't remember another slate or another season where we've ever had slates where this has happened. So I think Ty Madden is a viable leverage play in large field GPPs. Wouldn't play him in a lineup or two, but I've got double-digit exposure to him across 150 lineups, and I'm cool with that being a contrarian guy I get to. I think if you want to be contrarian today, kind of has to be on the low end of pitching.
Correct. To be fair, we also didn't have Aaron Judge doing Aaron Judge things the last 2 years, and Shohei Ohtani going to put up probably a 50-50 season when it's all said and done. He's now got one more stolen base that he added to the tally today. Just a ridiculous amount of talent from top to bottom. Some of the best players are just excessively good in terms of what they can do from a fantasy perspective now. So I do like the switch where it's just kind of fun to play a different style of game, you know, something that we do every single day rather than just come out and say the same redundant points over and over. Aaron Judge averages over 12 fantasy points per game this season. It's rightful for him against Jack Leiter to be 7K, and I have no problem with that whatsoever.
Anything else you want to add about the pitchers on DraftKings? If not, we'll look at the FanDuel pitchers.
To FanDuel.
All right, over to FanDuel. And if you guys have any questions for us in Discord, I am going to be answering those on the show here. We did get one from Clintwood83. He wants to know, who do we like at pitcher for DK single entry cash? Yeah, so I think it's pretty clearly just by default Logan Gilbert and Joe Musgrove. Correct, Eric?
Correct.
All right. If anybody else has questions, hit me up in the Discord here. But let's go ahead and look at the FanDuel pitchers. And what's different about FanDuel, where you only have to roster one pitcher, is ownership a little bit more spread out there. So Joe Musgrove is 21% owned, Jameson Taillon 17% owned, Logan Gilbert 17% owned. Which one of these guys are you going to be clicking on for a cash game if you have to build a cash game lineup on FanDuel?
Hang on. The Twins did something weird. They brought in Carlos Santana. He's going to be, so that's actually a bat you want to get to. He's batting 6th today. So they just literally 1-for-1 swapped the entire lineup with Carlos Santana. So I want everybody to be aware from that. Like, I'm going to just play Carlos Santana at first base because it was like a one-off spot for me there. Interesting. Just an interesting choice by the Twins there, but whatever. Back to what you were saying.
Yeah, let me see. What's the price point? Carlos Santana, first base only, I assume?
Correct. 3,200. Cheap.
Yeah, I'll get him in some lineups. It's going to be hard to prioritize him just being the first base eligibility only. But yeah, $3,200, batting 6th. Yeah, I agree with you. He's somebody to get into some lineups. FanDuel pitching. I was asking you, if you're building a cash game lineup on FanDuel, which is the pitcher you go to? Because we got 3 guys here that are pretty comparably owned. I do think these are your options. You're either going to Logan Gilbert, Jameson Taillon, or Joe Musgrove. I actually think Taillon's kind of over-owned on FanDuel at 8K, so I personally wouldn't consider him. But those are your 3 popular pitchers: Taillon, Gilbert, Musgrove. You're picking one for a cash game. Which direction do you go?
I just built out a lineup here. It has Logan Gilbert.
I'm most inclined to say Musgrove just because of the price point. He's $2,200 less expensive than Gilbert. $8,300 is a pretty ridiculous price on FanDuel. I don't have an issue with Logan Gilbert. I would just lean a little bit more towards Musgrove. I would have an issue with Taillon being the answer, though. There's a $300 price gap between Musgrove and Taillon. Just pay the $300 extra bucks and get yourself to Joe Musgrove. I'd feel better about that in a cash game. For GPP purpose, then I lean a little bit more towards Logan Gilbert just because you don't have to be spending up at as many of those spots. Like, I think cash games, you really want to lock in Yankees bats. Not quite as necessary for a GPP. So Logan Gilbert, my overall favorite FanDuel GPP pitcher. Do you like any of the contrarian pitchers, which is anybody who isn't one of the 3 we've talked about?
Yeah, I like a little bit more over on FanDuel, getting to Simeon Woods Richardson at 7,900. I think I would have a lot more of Simeon Woods Richardson at that number. Again, it's a straight up pivot off of Jameson Taillon. I think he has the better strikeout matchup between the 2. He has the better strikeout stuff between the 2. And then looking at Osvaldo Vito, I got 0 of him on FanDuel, so I find that to be kind of interesting as well. Yeah, I think that kind of covers it. Zach Littell is 3.5% owned here. Carlos Santana is not the bat you would have wanted to have him getting inserted in for, as opposed to Martin. Carlos Santana, notoriously pretty darn good at bats. Doesn't strike out a whole hell of a lot over the course of his career. 17.4% this season. So yeah, it's probably a little bit of a decrease to Zach Littell's projection. I should probably do that.
Let's see, a contrarian pitcher for FanDuel. Process of elimination. It's not going to be Beto, not going to be Littell. I guess I just lean on Simeon Woods Richardson. He's also my answer on DraftKings. $1,700, 6% owned. I think there's an interesting case for Garrett Cole as well, just because he is somebody who has a lot of talent and a lot of upside. He hasn't pitched to it this year. Not that he's been terrible or anything like that. It just hasn't been the Cy Young Garrett Cole that we're accustomed to from the past. 3.86 ERA, 4.26 expected ERA. The fastball velocity is still there, 96 miles per hour, but he's only thrown 63 innings this year. He's only made 12 starts. He missed about half the year with an injury. I do think he's going to be better going forward, but who knows? He's 33 years old. Maybe he's just lost a little bit of arm talent there, but single-digit ownership on FanDuel. I'm cool with making him somebody to get to in GPPs. I don't like him as much on DraftKings because he's somewhat popular. He's over 20% owned over on DraftKings. He's the 4th most popular pitcher on the slate. For FanDuel purposes, he was just one of the guys who's single digit owned. I'm okay taking a bet on Garrett Cole. Anything else you want to add about pitching tonight?
No. I think it's pretty clear cut here. Logan Gilbert, I think, is good chalk. I'd be surprised if he ended up torching you. I find Garrett Cole on FanDuel to be somebody I would want virtually zero of. On DK, I'm okay getting to a little bit as an SP2 and kind of mixing and matching some of these lower owned pitchers around him. But Simeon Woods Richardson, I do like more for Jameson Taillon, though. I do like what we're looking at from Musgrove as chalk. Yeah, it feels pretty clear cut. I think we talked through most of it.
All right, so let's start talking about some offenses. And if you guys have lineups that you want to see Jordan plug into our single lineup sims, which, by the way, are also live for NFL. If you sign up for that $1 deal, promo code kickoff for NFL, that does include the NFL single lineup simulator, as well as our other sims. So if you guys want to sign up for that, link down below in the description box. But if you want us to build out some baseball lineups to plug into the sims for you, hit up Jordan in the chat or hit me up in Discord, and I'll send the lineup over to Jordan. He could plug it in for you. Whose lineup was this one?
Look at
Capanicella. Looks like he's built another good lineup. Most of the lineups that Capanicella submits to you, Jordan, I noticed are pretty good ones. Looks like he's got, what is it, a twin stack? I guess just make sure Kepler isn't in the lineup. Cool. All right. So, yeah, no Kepler in there. And then who did he go with at pitcher? Simeon Woods Richardson and Logan Gilbert, it looks like. Yeah, I like that lineup. I think it looks perfectly fine to me. So let's start by talking about a single entry stack, Eric, and then we'll talk about large field GPPs. Who is it that you're liking in single entry? Because the first thing that stands out to me, the ownership on the Yankees and Padres, I think is going to be problematic in small fields, not quite as much in large fields, but small fields, I think the Yankees and the Padres are going to eat up pretty much all of the ownership. Everything else is going to be contrarian. Do you see it that way? And does that inform who it is you're looking to stack in single entry?
Yeah, I think the Padres, if I had to stack up one of the two in single entry, I would still go their direction. But the Yankees have a 19.9% top stack percentage. I mean, this is a gigantic number. 1 out of every 5 times you're running out this slate, you're going to have them finish as the top stack. It's pretty ridiculous. So, I mean, it's uncomfortable to get away from. But as you said, in small field, I do expect the Yankees end up nuclear. San Diego, I think, is going to probably be pretty popular too. They rolled out a really weird lineup. No Jake Cronenworth, no Profar. Obviously, Tatis coming back, so they have to make way for that. But Donovan Solano in there at 2,600, that's a bat I'd be avoiding in small field. So there's ways I still think you can get to San Diego, and it's not a complete disaster. I'm torn between them and then my Minnesota Twins. I think going up against Zach Littell, I know it's not the greatest ballpark, but we are getting a lot of leverage. And now we get a bat that's going to be like 1% in Carlos Santana. That's always very, very appealing for me. That news came out 25 minutes ago. People aren't going to rerun everything, but if you're building out one lineup like me, it's pretty easy to just swap in for one. I did have Nate Lowe. I was looking at Texas as being my 2-man or 3-man along with it, but I switched that up to Minnesota here. Got away from Lowe and going towards Carlos Santana, Castro at 4,300 leading off, and Trevor Larnach 3,100. The other byproduct of this, Max Kepler, if he's not available to do anything from a pitch hitting perspective, maybe they bring in Austin Martin, but he's so bad from a hitting perspective. I think Trevor Larnach and Matt Wallner have less pinch hit risk than they've had pretty much ever. And I say that like knock on wood, but like who's potentially coming in? It's going to be Ryan Jeffers as a righty, Kyle Farmer as a righty, but Farmer's been terrible and Martin's been terrible. So I think more than likely, Larnach, with a 492 expected slugging against everybody this season, I think he has a better chance of staying in this game too. So I like the Twins for small field.
It's tough. I don't have one team that really stands out to me. A lot of times on the smaller slates, what I like to do is I'm trying to find the pitcher that has the most ownership going up against an offense that's kind of unowned. And I think the pitcher might be a little bit flammable. So I'm right now leaning towards the Pittsburgh Pirates, Eric. And it's not because I think it's the best spot or anything like that, but it's more so because I think the Yankees are going to be so popular. in single entry, and people are going to be really hurting for those salary savings that I do think Tyone's like. I mean, we have Tyone project for 25% ownership. I do think he remains relatively popular in single entry, and I'm hoping that's the case because I'm looking to get some leverage stacking against him. The Pirates are also a team I'm overweight to the field too in large field GPPs. I actually do like them more in large field than single entry. I'm really struggling to figure out the one team that makes the most sense for single entry. Like I said, the first thing I do is I eliminate the Yankees and the Padres, not because I don't think they're the best stacks on the slate, but because I just think the ownership is going to be way too high in single entry. Then I start to look elsewhere, and it's like, all right, which lineups am I getting the most exposure to as stacks outside of the Yankees and Padres? And that's what brings me to the Pittsburgh Pirates and the Seattle Mariners. And between the two of them, I feel like I'm getting a little bit more leverage on the Pittsburgh side. So Pittsburgh it is for me, but I could also make a pretty good case for the Seattle Mariners going up against Osvaldo Bido. They are a very cheap offense, even though I consider them to be in a pretty good spot. I also bet Bido this morning for under 5.5 strikeouts. I think that's moved a pretty good amount there, so not playable anymore. But I do have a bet on under 5.5 strikeouts for Bido, and I like the Mariners offense. It's actually the team in large field GPPs I have the second most exposure to. In large field GPPs, I have the most of the Yankees overall, Eric, followed by the Seattle Mariners. But like I said, single entry is just different in large field GPPs because of how high the Yankees might be 30 to 40% owned in single entry today. Large field GPPs, are you getting the most of the Yankees or is it a different team?
So I built 150 out and the Yankees are just getting jammed. So that's cool. I will throw this out there. I built 150 lineups and I have 0 Pittsburgh Pirate stacks. So take that for what you will. That's fun.
And if you wouldn't mind, if you put the single lineups in back up, Jordan, I see a question from Comment God if you would put his lineup in. This is Comment God's. All right. Thank you, Slurp King. So if you see here some of these metrics that are on the screen. So Comment God, and this applies to everybody else who's watching as well. Simulated ROI. This is going to be the expected return of that lineup based on sim. So if you're playing a $100 contest, for instance, your expected return is $13. The win percentage, that's the percentage of time that it ends up coming in first place based on our simulations here. Top 10 percentage, that's the percentage of time that it finishes in the top 10, not necessarily top 10 percentile, because that's something you would want to be above 10%. And then you had specifically asked about the cash percentage. It's expected to cash 25.2% of the time. Now that might seem low considering that it has a positive expected ROI, but keep in mind a lot of these GPPs are only paying out 18 to 20% of the lineups in the contest. So anything that's like 25% is actually way above the rate that a normal lineup would expect it to cash. So yeah, looks pretty good. But also, yeah, that number, the cash percentage, kind of goes to show how hard it is to consistently cash lineups in a single entry, because even if you're way beating out the field, you're probably cashing like a 25 to 30% clip.
Yeah, you're looking for that massive upside with it too.
Oh, sorry, what was that, Eric?
No, it's okay. I just wanted to expand on your point where, yeah, you're trying to maximize, you play to win the game, and 0.2% doesn't sound like a lot on your screen, but like, that's going to be a lot better than 0.1. We're talking double, in fact. And, when you're aiming for the top, and when Greg talks you through, like, if you had to start a draft and, everybody were to draft and you were to take 1 through 12, which teams you're taking, I don't think Greg would take Pittsburgh number 1. That's not what he's saying, but we play an ownership and salary game. And when you factor those things in, that's why he's landing on Pittsburgh. I'm personally not landing on Pittsburgh. I think if I'm going cheap or trying to get very, very different on this slate, I would actually prefer Oakland for leverage against Gilbert than I would Pittsburgh in that game environment because of how much that park is going to play. It's just exponentially more difficult with the wind blowing in at Wrigley to see games shoot out. But again, we've also seen massive win games where then Minnesota and Chicago played like a 7-6 or 7-5 ball game or whatever it was. And on a 6-gamer, that can still work out.
Yeah. And then, I mean, another thing to add to that is I don't even really like the Pirates that much today. I find this to be a really difficult slate for single entry. So large field GPPs, once again, we've got the Yankees projected for about 15% ownership. I'll refresh this and then we'll look at FanDuel in a second here as well. But for DraftKings purposes, with the Yankees projected for 15% ownership, the Padres 13.6% ownership. Those are your two most popular teams by a really wide margin. And over on FanDuel, 19% projected ownership to the Yankees, and then 14% to the Padres as a stack. Before we move over to some of these FanDuel stacks, Eric, are there any low-owned teams that you're liking for leverage in the way that I'm getting to Pittsburgh to get a little bit of leverage off of Jameson Taillon?
So, I mean, I'm looking at that Oakland stack, and there's a part of me that would want to pull the trigger on it in like a small field type situation, because Gilbert's going to be what, 65% in the 121 or something? Like, I think that's actually higher. Yeah. God, it makes me want to stack Oakland, but I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to. I'm a coward, the likes of which this world's never seen before.
In large field GPPs, I do have 8% of the A's, and they're projected for 4.7% ownership, the lowest owned team on the slate. You know, even these really low owned offenses, relatively, the A's and the Tigers, not like they're unowned, nearly 5% for each of them. So I'm a little bit overweight to Oakland, but 8% isn't as much overweight to Oakland as it would seem to be, considering how popular Gilbert is. But let's go ahead and talk about the FanDuel side of things now, because over on FanDuel, Eric, we've got, like I said, 19% ownership going to the Yankees, 14% for the Padres. The Yankees are massively problematic to me in single entry in terms of ownership. Like large field GPPs, it looks about fair. We've got them at 20% top stack odds. If I don't like the Yankees at 15% ownership on DraftKings, I definitely don't like them at nearly 20% over on FanDuel, where I think you can say with a pretty high degree of certainty, you're going to get hitters 35 to 40% owned in single entry for FanDuel. So which team do you go like the Yankees, or is there a different team that you like for FanDuel stacks?
Oh, for FanDuel, it's tough to get away from some of the Yankees. If you're going down to Musgrove again, that's kind of the thing, is like Gilbert makes it really hard. I was trying to build out like a Soto Judge lineup just for fun with it. Wells is cheaper there, like 3,200, but like working through some of the Yankees bats to get to the two big boppers, it's hard to bring Gilbert along for the ride. I would say building out one lineup over there, I'd still be going towards the Minnesota Twins. The most positively leveraged, top stack percentage, right around 9%. It's third best, fourth best on the slate, basically 0.1% behind Boston. But God, I keep looking at Oakland. They have no love again, and they're going to just be like 2% over on FanDuel, I think. We've got them at 3.9%. Maybe you're not getting as much leverage as DK, where Logan Gilbert will be jammed in as an SP1. So I think one lineup, I'll say Minnesota yet again over on FanDuel.
I'll say Pittsburgh, just because you've got Tyron's almost 20% owned over on FanDuel. So the ownership now, since our last update, we now have 18% ownership to Musgrove, 18% to Gilbert, 17% to Taillon over on FanDuel. A little rounding, it's actually 19%, 19%, 16.5 or whatever. But it's very comparable between Musgrove, Taillon, and Logan Gilbert. Taillon's not as good of a pitcher as those other two guys. So I feel better about the Pirates, at least from a leverage standpoint on FanDuel, even than I do on DraftKings, even though it's my single entry stack over on DK. Because, I mean, Taillon being comparably owned to Gilbert and Musgrove seems pretty ridiculous to me, especially when Musgrove and Taillon are like the same price point over on FanDuel. So give me the Pirates as well on the FanDuel side of things.
Oh, boy. Here you go.
Any other stacks that are important to you?
I don't think so. I mean, we could... Are you playing any Boston going up against Severino? Because Boston top 3 in WRC plus against righties over the last any sample size you use. And I don't love it as much as what it would appear the field does. But, I mean, there's positive leverage there we've got right now over on FanDuel. We've got positive leverage on DraftKings as well. Are you stacking up Boston?
Not really. I only have 4% of them, and they are projected for... Let's see, what was the ownership over on the DraftKings side of things for Boston? Yeah, we've got Boston at 7% ownership. So I'm underweight to Boston. So not quite getting there. They're also pretty expensive. They have, what do they have? Like the second lowest top value odds of any stack of the entire slate for us.
Yep, they're pretty expensive. That's part of the problem, but
pitcher
working
park
through
as
it.
Well.
Yep, exactly.
So yeah, not going to, at least not relative to the field. I've got about half of what Boston has relative to what the field has. I understand that they've been playing really well, and if price point didn't matter, but it does, then I could make myself a case for Boston. But if you play Boston, it's going to mean you probably, and if you're stacking the hitters you actually care about and want to get to at the top of the lineup, it's cost prohibitive. There's an opportunity cost there. So Boston, not for me relative to what the field is doing. But Sean Jeezy left us a super chat. He says, Eric, I'm playing Oakland in single entry. I feel even better now about you hearing you say that you like it. It is a lot of leverage. Yeah,
the word
Sean,
was not.
You're getting you'll be one of like 3 or 4 people that are stacking Oakland in single entry today. I get it.
Yeah, it's something I want to do. Again, I think it's probably the positive EV thing long term to do, but boy, oh boy, am I not comfortable with it.
All right. Oh boy, we're almost at lock. I got to upload my lineups. And then let's do our home run picks here. So Eric, dong pick, hit me with it. And then we're going to get the Slurp King, his home run call in a second here too. But for yourself, Eric, who hits a homer today?
So I didn't bet it because the prices are just getting ridiculous on this guy against right-handed pitching, but it's Matt Wallner, 283 expected ISO against right-handed pitching, 20-degree average launch angle, 9 homers now on the season. Remember, I said it was going to get to double digits quick. It's 1 away from that. So Zach Littell, 184 ISO, 187 expected ISO against lefties. Yeah, he's going to take him yard in a terrible ballpark. Can't wait for that new ballpark in Tampa. That'll be fun.
My most roster hitter on the slate. Great position eligibility, MPE, O'Neal Cruz.
I knew you were going to say.
Shortstop eligible. I have him in 26% of my lineups. He is going to be my most rostered hitter here. So almost 3x the field on him. That's going to be my home run pick, O'Neal Cruz. And I know the hitting conditions aren't ideal there, but O'Neal Cruz, kind of like Aaron Judge, if he makes contact, doesn't fucking matter. The guy's a gigantic human being. O'Neal Cruz, that is going to be my dong pick for today. Slurp King. Queue up your favorite dong over there because we're going to go to you in a second. But first, see what we have from chat. We've got B Funk going with Corey Seager, Tristan Cassis from EMAC. We've got Lawrence Butler from Bob the Builder, Giancarlo Stanton from BX44, Starling Marte from Ricardo Nelson, Francisco Lindor from Reg Kell, Xander Bogaerts from Malukar, Josh Lowe from Aaron Hines, Julio Rodriguez from, he told me how to pronounce his name the other day, and I have completely forgotten it. Pioho YouTube, I think is what it was. Maybe. Eric Johnson going with Spencer Torkelson, Pete Crow Armstrong, and O'Neal Cruz for a stolen base from Comment God. Fernando Tatis from Spanish Martin, Brent Rooker from Sean Jeezy, Tatis as well from Gary M, JJ Bleday from Donnie Boone, and then we've got Luis Ariz from Francisco Rubio. Slurp King, who's your favorite dong today?
Seiya Suzuki dong.
All right. Seiya Suzuki from Jordan Klein. Yeah, that is going to be his dong pick. So, guys, thank you very much for watching. If you haven't done yet, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and take advantage of that $1 NFL promo. Link is down below in the YouTube description box. Promo code's already loaded into that. So if you click on it, it'll take you right to the sign-up page already settled for you. So, guys, thank you very much for watching. Good luck with the slate today, and we'll see you back here tomorrow. Football content starting. We got Ben and Lofty on the First Look show.